And welcome back everyone to another episode of Advanced React WordPress Theme Development with Next.js. In the previous video, we learned about how to create a login page, and then finally, once the user is logged in, we also set the cookie with the auth token and put that into the HTTP only cookie. Okay, and then also we redirected the user to the preview page, and now we just have to get the data on the preview page because user is already authenticated, right? So what we're going to do is we'll go to that blog preview ID, and I'm going to go ahead and copy paste the code so it saves time. So it'll be preview/d, this one. I'm going to click on this, view file, raw, copy, and then paste here. Okay, so over here, we are calling it post preview, and then we are exporting default using layout. We are passing the data. We're also passing something. We're also passing a props called isPost, and I'll explain to you why in a moment. And then we're using getServerSideProps. The reason why we are not using getStaticProps is because we're not going to be generating this preview data at the build time, right? We want to do it at the runtime. So whenever the request comes in, that's when we want to generate the page and pre-render the page with the content by making a query to WordPress. So what we do is we get the auth token first. So we have a function that passes the cookies server side, gets the token, and also makes a query called getPostID. So we need to add this query. So what we'll do is we'll go to the source and then queries, and then we'll create something called posts, and we'll create something called getPost. So getPost, and then get, and the name of the query is getPostById, which is this one. So I'm going to copy this query, and then inside of getPost, I'm going to paste it here. Let me also paste the getPost. We're going to need that as well. So let's just put that on top. You can take the code from the repo. So we've got getPost and we've got the getPostById. So this query basically is going to get us the post where the ID type is database ID and the ID is whatever you passed inside of the variable. We get the ID, title, content, slug, URI, and the SEO fragment along with status. Okay, so we're just going to do that query here. And we pass the ID from the params.id because remember, over here we have this ID available, right? So that's what we are passing inside of this query. Then, so Apollo also allows us to pass another option called context, and this is where you can set your headers. So we are setting headers with authorization, so authorization headers. We are checking if auth token is available. We are extracting that from the cookie on server side. And then we're setting the bearer token to that auth token, and then we're sending a request so that it's authenticated so that we get the data for that preview post. Otherwise, we won't get the data because the user needs to be logged in order for us to get the preview post data. It's not going to be available publicly. That's why we need to pass this auth token. Okay. So then we get the data in the default props. There's one more thing that we do over here, and we call it as login redirect URL, because remember that maybe the auth token is expired, and if it's expired, then we're not going to get the data, and if we don't get the data, then we need to redirect him to the login preview redirect URL. In future, we can implement another functionality where we do kind of a query to check and validate if the auth token is valid, but for now, let's just go with this, and we can update those things later. So we need to create this function, and we can create that function inside of the source, and then utils, and then slug. So inside of the slugs, we'll create a function called get login preview redirect URL. So let's search for that. Here it is. So inside of slug, down at the bottom, I paste this, and this basically is going to take the post type, and it's going to take the post preview ID, and then it's just going to generate that login URL by passing the post type as well as the post preview ID inside of it. Okay, so we want to redirect the user to login page in case if the query fails basically. Yeah. So, all right. So let's go back to the ID, and now we have this function available, which is brilliant. And then we also need to remove this get page by ID. Yep, you got to remove that. And then finally, so that's all sorted, I think. And then handled redirect, basically we are passing some additional parameters to this. So let's update our handle redirect data function. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my handle redirect functionality here. So what we're going to do over here is that pass some extra params, which is like is preview, if it's preview or not, and what is the, if it's a preview, then what should be the login redirect URL. If it's a preview that you are handling redirects for, and if the data is not available, which means maybe the page is not available, whatever field we are passing. So in this case, it's the post we are passing. So if the post is not available, redirect the user to that login redirect URL, which in this case is your login / post type equals post, and then and preview post ID, right? So that user can log in, and then we can generate a fresh authentication token and then put that in the cookie once again. So we have the authenticated request, and the status code will be 307. Otherwise it's going to be 503 if no data is available. Else, if the whole field is empty, then it's just 404. All right. So let's close this one. So the handle redirect is taken care of. We are passing the post. We are saying it's is preview true, and we're also passing the login redirect URL, which we generated from this particular function. Okay. Now there are some changes we need to make inside of the layouts as well. So we need to pass something called is post, and if it is a post, then the SEO will be equal to post.seo. If it's a page, then it will be page.seo. Same thing goes for the URI as well. And then we are making the updates instead of saying page.seo, because sometimes we may be using the layout either for post or page. So depending on what type it is, depending on what we're passing from the layout component props, we're going to change that. So that's what we are changing over here. Instead of saying page.seo, we're just saying SEO over here, and we are passing that information from the top. Okay, same thing goes for URI as well. And then finally, instead of saying page.seo.schema details, we're just replacing that with just SEO. And then finally, we're adding the prop types like is post, and that type is Boolean. Initially, we're setting that to false. So by default, we are going to assume that it's going to be page. And then all I have to do is just install the prop types because we're going to be using the prop type. So I'll cancel this one. I'll say yarn add prop types. Then we'll open this file. So we'll open this one, raw, and then copy and paste it here. So it's going to replace all of this stuff over here. Okay, cool. So that's what we have here. So you've got the schema details, you've got the header and the footer, and this is what is going on. So now if you go back and do npm run dev, and then if you do a refresh, you can see that it's showing you all of the post content. So take a look at what you're getting inside of the data. So we're making a query called get post by ID, which is when we're passing the ID from the URL, which is the 25. That's a preview ID. We're getting the title, content, slug, and SEO information. We're passing this headers authorization. That's why we're able to get this data. If we don't pass the authorization header, we won't get it. And also we're passing that data to our component, so on top. And if you check what data we are getting, so take a look, you've got the footer menu, header menu, and then we also got the post. So this time the post is not empty. So post is not empty because it's authorized, so we can see the content of the post. All right. And in the backend, you can see that this is a draft post, right? Okay. All right. So similarly, we will do the one for page as well in the next video. I hope you did like the video. If you did, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. and I'm going to see you in the next video. Thank you very much.